Good afternoon, everybody. My name's Philippa Woodhill. I'm Director of Partnerships with the Australian Rural Leadership Foundation, and it gives me great pleasure to open this applicant webinar for the 30th Australian Rural Leadership Program in our 30th year. Before we kick off and get into our agenda, I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands on which we all meet. I'm beaming in my Ugg boots, I might tell you, from Yagara Turrbal country in southeast Queensland at the bottom of the D'Aguilar Range, and joined by some of my work colleagues as well as some alumni to participate in this program, in this webinar. They too recognise the leadership of First Nations people across the country and recognise their elders past, present, and those walking with us into the future. So today, just some housekeeping. Firstly, please stay on mute unless at the end you have a question that you'd like to ask. Select speaker view for the best experience. And in the chat, if you could introduce yourself and share what country that you're on in the chat box, that'd be great. We are recording this webinar and it's also being live streamed on Facebook and will be emailed to you and to those unable to make it today. It's been amazing. We've had over 130 people register for this webinar. We're really excited by that, and certainly testament to the significant amount of work that myself and colleagues and our associates around the country have been engaged in supporting leadership development for Australia's regions over the past 12 months. Please do, if you have any comments or questions in the chat, we'll be monitoring that as best that we can, and there will be time for specific questions at the end. And so next slide, please, Hayley. I'm going to kick off and share a little bit about the Australian Rural Leadership Program and the application process. Director of Learning, Andrea Hogg, will go through some of the more detailed information about the ARLP and certainly some of its evolution and the opportunity that Course 30 is for each of you. And then most importantly, really look forward to hearing from both Damien and Emily, and I'll introduce them more formally in the program a little bit later on. And then your turn to ask any hairy question that you can't find on an FAQ, that you can't find on the website, or that maybe one of the alumni or those referring you into this applicant haven't been able to help you with to date. So the Australian Rural Leadership Foundation is in its 30th year. We're really excited that over 3 decades been able to continue our support of rural, regional and remote Australia. We're a not-for-profit and we're the only national leadership development organisation that's not-for-profit with a focus in rural, regional and remote Australia. For the 30 years, we've delivered the Australian Rural Leadership Program. We also support industry-based leadership programs, and over the past 12 to 18 months, a significant increase in our ability to support regions locally with leadership development that means something to them, right through the Drought Resilient Leaders Program and most recently and just launched Leading Australian Resilient Communities Program as well. Hayley. So with all of that work, it means that this year we actually clocked over 2,000 alumni committed to working where they choose and demonstrating their leadership to support the regions. They're across private, community, government, all organisations and also all sectors. So traditionally been very much, and in our first decade, focused on ag, but an increasing understanding that the fabric of rural, regional and remote communities includes all sectors and industries and people, and its leadership's required at all levels. We're really proud of the work that our alumni network do and really let them choose. Like it's up to our alumni to choose where they lead. We don't predetermine whether that is at a football club or in a Parliament House, all are important, and our ability to support regions at dinner tables, in community meetings and elsewhere is really important. So thank you. If there are graduates online that have come in for a sticky beak, we really appreciate what you're doing, and your impact is our impact. Thank you. So into the nitty-gritty of why you're actually here today. The Australian Rural Leadership Program remains our flagship, and like all of our programs is challenge-based. And really it's as much about the people in the program as it is the agenda that we put in front of you. You will learn as much from the experiences that are provided to you as you will about how other people respond to those experiences, and what that says to you about how you engage, and how maybe you could differently engage to get the most out of people around you. It's not classroom based. We're really interested in understanding what your real world context is, for you digging into other people's contexts, and then challenging yourself to see multiple points of views and perspectives based on the experiences that you're going through, not just on program, but also in between sessions. So whilst the program is, face-to-face for a set number of days, the program really encompasses so many things over that 15 months and your interactions both in your workplace, in your family, and also with your peer group as you learn to support each other through that time. And ultimately, we're here for the greater good. So really, applicants that are successful have already demonstrated their ability to operate beyond their own agenda. And so, yes, your agenda is important, but how do you see that contributing to something much bigger than yourself, whether that be your industry, your region, or even the country and the world? The RLP is a significant commitment. As I said, there are face-to-face, in-person sessions. That's certainly been a challenge over the past 2 to 3 years, and our ability to operate in a hybrid model where needed to draw on online, and technology has also been accessed. And we'll continue to challenge ourselves in that way and bring the cohort together as best we can over a 15-month window in regions across the country and also internationally. And so whilst some of our most recent cohorts haven't done that, we certainly see that the outcomes that they've been able to achieve through engagement with other multicultural communities in this country have still provided significant learning. And Andrea will go into some more of that detail. As I said, the commitment's not just about your commitment. The commitment's about your commitment to, or the commitment that your family makes while you're away and out of home, and committing to your own development in the interests of regional Australia. It speaks to the commitment that your workplace needs to make, and really encourage you to have those conversations both with family, with friends, with your support network, and your workplace, because it is a commitment that everybody makes, and it is why this process is so long. They're long conversations, and I know Damien's got his own story. It's something that takes a while to get off the ground, so please don't underestimate that. In addition to those commitments, you've also got, one more, Hayley. You've also got the commitment to your sponsor. So this program is funded scholarship by scholarship, year on year. The ARLF doesn't receive corpus funding. We don't have some amazing reserve that we draw on. So year on year, we have a team that go out to industry, out to our existing partners and also new partners to seek support for scholarships, which means that these scholarships are tied. And so, for instance, the cotton industry supports someone out of the cotton industry. CBH, Cooperative Bulk Handling in the West, support somebody out of the Cooperative Bulk Handling network and employees. So really important to understand that. And certainly our team are happy to talk to you about those scholarships, and we work really hard with our partners, of which I have to recognise at this point the fact that about 60% of our funding partners have been with us for 30 years or nearly 30 years. So there aren't a huge number of surprises in the scholarship base, and we're increasingly looking to seek philanthropic support and work with our partners to open up the criteria of those scholarships to support the extraordinary applicants that we do get applying, and really look forward to working with each of you through the process and beyond. Thank you, Hayley. So just finally from me, before I hand over to Andrea, it is a long process and we really do need the time. And I would hazard a guess that the time is also useful for you. And a lot of people that I've spoken to, a lot of participants have reflected that their experience of the ARLF actually started when they first applied for the Australian Rural Leadership Program. Some of the questions that we ask you, both in the application form and the interview, really ask you to dig a little bit deeper than what you might on a standard job application form or for another leadership program. So we ask you to take those questions seriously. And again, the team are certainly happy to talk through any roadblocks or mind blanks that you get at different times. And I would also encourage you to draw on your own networks as you have those conversations. So we're only at the first little bend in the road, and that is the Q&A webinar today. This will be available online, and happy for you to share the link with others. We will close the applications and then go through a interview and selection process. That takes the best part of 6 to 8 weeks for us, depending on how efficient all our applicants are and those that do get interview at locking in their interview time appropriately. We will do our best to communicate with those that aren't successful this time round for an interview, and certainly give you any feedback. And again, the team will be happy to work with you on that. We're working really hard to make a public announcement in February next year, which gives everybody plenty of time to book out their life, organise their family and their workplace. One of the biggest challenges for all of us as leaders is to know that the world exists without us, and really important part of the program as well, that you set up those systems in work and your community to support your participation. And then this time in 12 months, for those of you that are successful, we'll be debriefing with your community about the wonderful opportunity that our first session program and the 34 other participants are that you've met, and certainly look forward to those stories. And I know Damien and Emily will have some reflections later in the webinar. So that's it for me from a process perspective. Please reach out and ask any questions at the end. And Andrea, over to you.
Thanks, Philippa. And I too would like to extend a very warm welcome to everybody who's joined us today. It's really reassuring to see so many interested people in the ARLP Course 30. I'm the Director of Learning at the Australian Rural Leadership Foundation. I'm joining you today from Ngunnawal Ngambri country, and I would like to extend my respects to Elders past and present, and to pay my respect to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples here today. It's my pleasure. I'm going to show you just a few short slides to give you quite a high-level visual representation of the kind of components that we focus on and in the Australian Rural Leadership Program, and to commence some of that understanding for you about, well, what will I actually do in that program? What will I learn? What will they do to me and for me, and all of those sorts of things. It's only at a high level, as I mentioned, and so we'll take a look at those slides now. Thanks, Hayley. So the first visual representation is a little bit around how we convene and how we gather groups of people in our leadership development work. And the Australian Rural Leadership Program, as Philippa mentioned, usually is around a cohort of up to 35 people from all over Australia, from a range of different backgrounds, ages. We try to, we see a lot of difference in the participants in our program. The image there at the top there, which is the largest blue person, that large blue person is you if you are a successful participant on this program. So if you come into the Australian Rural Leadership Program, you are an active participant, you are an adult learner, and you are going to be engaging in challenge-based experiential learning. So experiential learning is a methodology. It's a significantly evidence-based methodology. If you're seeking to look up any further information about that, you can look it up yourself, or we can provide you with some links about it. Essentially, the value proposition of experiential learning is that you learn as an adult by doing. So you are able to engage in activities, you are then taken through a reflection stage, you're then able to have an ideation stage around future actions, and then you can implement them. And so this is the methodology that underpins this particular program. So as a participant, you have opportunities to work on self, so to engage in the learning that actually has the greatest amount of impact on you as an individual, and always you will be working in the context of others. So learning is a highly social activity. And there's a lot of evidence to prove that the more that you engage with others, you speak to others, and you actually learn through the ideation of knowledge and intellectual property with others, that has far more value than doing that on your own. So in this group, you are engaging in some individual activities, you'll go into small groups, you might go into, larger pockets of groups in the cohort, and then very frequently you will be engaging within the entire cohort. What's important to note, and could make this an interesting decision for you as to whether this is the kind of program you wish to undertake. This is not a process whereby you are taught. You are certainly not trained. So the notion that we train people to be in leadership or be leaders is very far from our preferred methodology. People who are engaged to be part of your cohort as facilitators are actually facilitating opportunities for you to undertake the work to do the learning you need to do. And as I said before, that's often enhanced by being around others. So in this group, what we would ask of you, and the primary levers that you can actually move and maneuver, the most primary one is your curiosity. Not your knowledge, not what you've known in the past, not what you've done in the past, not what your current practices are in leadership. Bring your curiosity and your willingness to apply that curiosity to what could be envisioned differently into the future, because that's where we're going to take you. Curiosity, number one on our target list as a leadership practice that we're going to develop over the 15 months. Not only will you be curious and you'll be asking questions and you'll be looking at things and you'll be framing things differently, and your facilitators will be actively doing that with you, you will also be engaging in lots of dialogue. And that's those three little speech bubbles there in the 3 dots in the speech bubbles. And you'll have many, many, many conversations. And conversations should not be undervalued in terms of their impact. Those conversations can anywhere between deep listening, searching for meaning, seeking to establish relationships and empathy conversations. They can go into harder conversations where you have to raise topics that actually can be quite confronting between different people. You can move into conversations that are really focused on advocacy and activism in leadership, and speaking up for minority groups, or speaking up for the interests of people in regional, rural, remote Australia. You can have the kind of conversations where you reveal to other people where your deepest feelings and considerations and vulnerabilities lie. So there's a lot of conversation, and conversation is not one thing. There are many, many, many different types of conversation, and this program, you will explore a lot of that. Over in the other side of that diagram, you've got a group of people there. They've also got question marks because they've got lots of questions. This is a program where questions trump answers. Go away consciously wanting to answer more than you came in knowing. And that'll be a sign that you really actively participated in this program. And then the other area there with the little light bulb is there will be multiple opportunities to ideate, to create, to develop ideas, to try things and realize, no, that's not going to work. I'm going to have to go back and I'm going to have to try something else, because that is the challenge of leadership. And in the future, we need to recognise it in Australia and in rural regional Australia. We need restorative leadership for this country in terms of our cultures and our relationships with people and our restoration of our land and our country. And we also need regenerative practices in our leadership. We don't have all those answers now. And so that's a little light bulb. How can we actually convene groups together to start ideating and creating for the future? Thanks, Hayley. So the next diagram is also a little bit about how you might find yourself showing up or feeling, or some of the experiences that actually might come to the fore for you in the program. So in terms of this diagram there are the three circles. The inner circle is the comfort zone, then there's learning zone, and then there's a panic zone. In most of our lives, we hang out mainly in that comfort zone. And there's really good reasons for why we do that, okay? We're trying to get our needs met. We don't need to take on too many risks in our day-to-day lives. Our brains don't actually like it, and nor does our body when we're under threat. So we hang out a lot in the comfort zone. And subsequently, a lot of our organisations and our leadership models and our leadership relationships, they are also hanging out in a comfort zone. And some people would say they're pretty much operating on autopilot and not necessarily questioning what it might feel like to do something that's out of comfort zone. What if we stepped into a different zone outside of comfort? What is the richness of the new learning that could take place there? So that's where we will take you into our program. To stretch into that learning zone as much as you possibly can for the duration of the program, and to also ask your peers in this program to do similarly. Because it's no good if only some of the cohort are willing to do it and not other parts of the cohort. And I would just preface that by saying that everybody's learning zone is a bit different. So whilst we have a lot of different activities in this program, no one learning zone is the same for another person. And that also speaks to the panic zone, because there may be some activities in this program where people find themselves, oh, I think I've gone beyond learning. I might actually be here in a bit of a panic zone at the moment. This feels quite unfamiliar to me. Panic zone, you can also learn in. Absolutely, learning can take place in panic. We won't keep you in panic, because that actually does a few bad things to your brain and your body. But actually, you might find yourself stepping into that at different points in the program as well. And when I say panic, it's really just those areas where you feel really, really, really quite uncomfortable because it's quite unfamiliar to you. Or you've carried in a whole lot of assumptions in your head, because we all carry them. Oh, I won't be able to do that. And what happens is that that story triggers you to think that you can't do it. What we'll then try to do is bring you back into learning, where you will be able to undertake some of those things you never thought that you could. Thanks, Hayley. And so the ARLF has a curriculum, a learning curriculum. We also have a theory of change. We think deeply about what are the best activities, what's the best design elements that we can include in all of our programs. As I said before, we always adhere to experiential learning, and we are looking at developing your leadership practice, the way in which you go about doing the things that will help you to enact your leadership in whatever arena that is that you choose. whilst you're undertaking this program, we will ask you and invite you and offer lots of opportunities for you to step into wonder and to invite wonder into your life, because wonder is a beautiful place and a beautiful thing to do when new things happen and curiosity becomes important. We'll also ask you to accept and to bring challenge into your leadership practice, where you start challenging your own thoughts, your own ways of doing things, and you're willing to offer that same challenge to other people. That's the only way that people grow, is when they are offered different opportunities to be challenged. We'll offer you the opportunity to innovate in many, many, many different ways and in many, many different contexts. We will offer you the opportunity to nourish yourself, to nourish your thinking, your body, your psychology, your relationships with other people, and to further nourish your leadership in terms of the broader network of people that you'll meet on this program and as being part of the ARLF alumni in the future. And we'll ask you and offer you the opportunity to consider persisting in leadership. Leadership's not quick. You don't always get quick wins. Solutions aren't always readily available. Leadership is not the terrain for the people who lack persistence or tenacity. It is the land really for the courageous people. And so we ask you to persist and to offer that you begin to develop that practice as well. So those are really the 5 high-level offerings. If those look like things that are really appealing to you and attractive to you in the way in which you would learn in a program, then this might consolidate your decision to apply for this program. Thanks, Hayley.
Oh, so that's me again. So thank you very much, Andrea. It's my turn now to introduce Damien and Emily. And so firstly, Damien is an alumni of the program and currently Queensland Regional Manager for Dairy Farmers Milk Cooperative, milk supply cooperative that operates across 4 states. And it's a role he's really only recently in and since finishing the ARLP. He's a 5th generation on his dairy farm and certainly calls Hillside and the region of the South Burnett region of Queensland home. He's served as a councillor and also worked in agricultural policy in both Canberra and North Queensland. He remains passionate about rural advocacy and in particular the dairy industry, and continues to want to have an impact on shaping policy that secures a better deal for Australia's food producers. Emily, we've gone with the Queensland theme today, myself also in Queensland. So Emily's also in Queensland, incidentally, originally from Texas. She is currently employed by Dross & Angus at Holbrook. And her passion is around the supply chain. She's committed to building physical and human resource capabilities and efficiencies for rural and regional communities. She's also heavily involved in the community as president of an early childhood education service and her family's cattle business throughout New South Wales. It's my great pleasure to have a conversation now with both Emily and Damien about their experience. And I am going to kick off, Damien, with you and ask you the question, what were your expectations? And now having graduated, were your expectations met?
Thanks, Philippa. And just like to acknowledge that I'm coming from Turrbal and Yuggera country here in southeast Queensland, but I am a Waka Waka original, and I saw somebody else was there from Waka Waka country. So my story is I got in on my 4th application. So when Andrea was talking about tenacity and staying power and all that kind of thing, that's 100% true. I guess I had a real passion to help unite the industry that I knew and I loved and my family had been so heavily involved in, being the dairy industry. And I wanted to step up. I could see the contraction going on in the industry, and we were fighting old battles that had been, all the way back to deregulation. And a very short story, but I was standing at the Coolangatta sale yards in 2016. A group of us dairy farmers were there. A beef bloke came along, and it was at the height of the milk wars and the clawback, and Victorian farmers were really doing it tough. And they said, "Oh, you caught up in this?" And no, that's a Victorian thing, we're good. One of the farmers I was with said, "Well, this is their comeuppance, they deserve it. Look what they did to us in deregulation." And it really had a key moment where I thought we in Queensland really need to sort of look beyond the battles of the past. So I really was motivated to step up, and that's why I put my hand up again for the 4th time and was succeeded. I got sponsored by Dairy Australia. So all of those things, I wanted to grow my contacts. I wanted to be able to step up, and so moving on from there, I've stepped into this amazing role with Dairy Farmers Milk Cooperative in a really key leadership role. We're not just buyers of milk, but we're a lot of work for our farmers, but also the industry more broadly. And it's really a job that I've got to admit I'm loving, and I put it down to the motivation of graduating from ARLF. It really whet my appetite. I wanted to be involved. I went out on a limb. I don't know whether I would have necessarily applied had I not graduated from ARLF, but it really gave me the confidence to be able to step into a space that I wanted to be in. And as I say, having a really mad time. Spent the last 3 days on the road in southeast Queensland talking to farmers. It's the exact space I want to be in.
Thanks, Damien. And so just quickly, yes or no, did the program meet your expectations?
Oh, yes. No, absolutely.
Excellent. Thank you. And so, Emily, for you now, what has it meant for you to be selected to participate in the Australian Rural Leadership Program?
Thanks, Philippa, and I'd like to acknowledge the Wiradjuri people, which I'm coming from the lands in southern New South Wales today, so just east of Holbrook on the Murray River. So what it's meant for me, I've actually had a complete career change as being part of the program. When I applied for the program, I was working for the JBS, the largest protein supplier in the world. I was sitting very regionally in a town that had some huge social and mental health issues. We were the biggest employer in the town, and leadership in that space can be a really lonely journey. And I suppose I was looking for something to give me a kick forward into how I could actually cope with that. I had lots of direct reports, 65 direct reports, and I thought I had all of these issues that I needed to solve, both in our community and in our business, and potentially didn't have all the tools that I needed to do that. So I've been on the journey now. I put my application in just on 2 years ago, and we will graduate in November. And in that time, I've actually had not a complete career change. I've really, I suppose, worked out what I want and what really the value is for Emily, and what that actually means for me, and what actually makes me tick, and what drives my motivation every day. If I think about before, if I hadn't been on the program and where I would be today, I'd probably still be on that same treadmill or that trajectory. So it's really allowed me the time, the space, and probably the push I needed to really find out what really drove me and motivated me. What it means for me to be on part of the program, I have been lucky over my career to have 5 managers that are alumni of the program, and I probably saw the transformation that they had whilst they're on the program, and how their leadership and their connection really developed in the program. And it was kind of like, I want some of what they've had. So now, as being I haven't graduated, we graduated at the end of the year, but I probably am starting to understand the transformation that they've been in for themselves. And it's about yourself and how you can impact regional and rural Australia. And I think that's the power of the program.
Thanks, Emily. And back to you, Damien. can you talk a little bit about the commitment that the program was for you and how you managed the balance of, you know, adding one more thing into your bucket to try and do over what, you know, we all know for increasingly is a busy life? How did you manage that commitment, both work, home, and also the financially?
Well, I had a really good employer, and I had a very open conversation with them and said, look, this is something I've really wanted to do for a long time. This is what the commitment is. And there was a lot of flexibility given there. And it wasn't an employer at the time that was in the ag space. So, you know, I think that level of flexibility is important, and having those really open conversations with your employer is key. There is a level of commitment in between each of the sessions, and I think, you know, really got to be aware of that. I don't want to give too much away, obviously. We're sworn to secrecy what happens, but there is a level of commitment, and I embraced it. I stepped up into a couple of those leadership roles of chairing some of our committees and different things. So you can either balk at it and never do it because you think, oh, I've never got any time, or you can put a real priority on it and embrace it. And, you know, I've got to admit, I've come away, been a counsellor, done all that kind of thing. I kind of thought I might have been at a certain level, and I've grown so much in it. So embrace that work in between. But look, I mean, I don't have a wife or a family or any of that kind of stuff. So I was able to really balance that quite easily. But I think also just really some of the other people on the cohort, I think they had some very tough moments. So again, I think having a really understanding spouse is key, and just being upfront, but knowing that where you're at when you graduate is just such an asset for rural, regional and remote Australia. So, you know, just to power through it and support.
Yeah, thanks, Damien. And Emily, for you, how have you gone managing the time away from home and work?
Yeah, it's a really crazy concept. You kind of step out into your sessions and you kind of into your own microclimate where you don't have a lot of contact with the outside world, and without giving a lot away, you know, then you have to come back into reality and normal life. So I think it's about if you apply, you've got to make the commitment in your own headspace that you're going to give it all you've got. So, and you're going to get the most out of this program that you can possibly get. So you are allocated blocks before you go away. So it's not, they don't ring up this week and say you're going to be out of contact for 2 weeks starting on Monday. You know what's coming up. So it's about organisation of your life to do that. I think Damien picked on a really good point. You've got to have a really good network around that supports you and who endorses you going on the program. They might not necessarily know what you've done or share the experience, but they've got to be able to be there to see the good, the bad and the ugly, and to be able to come back and debrief with those guys, I think is really important. And also to Damien's point, I think that there is work between sessions, and you've got to be able to commit to that. Like my cohort has a meeting tonight at 7:30, a Zoom hookup, and it'll go for a couple of hours, and it's kind of like a compulsory session. But there is some really good things out of it. If I look back in the last 7 days, I've spoken to 7 different people out of my cohort about various different things because you've got this network. So I think it's about allocating the block and putting that aside. And it's amazing what you can do when you survive without a mobile phone or any contact to the outside world, how entrenched you can get in your learning.
Yeah, so it's like a really good book all of a sudden, or a binge series you're watching on Netflix. All of a sudden you find these hours in the day you never knew you really had.
Yep.
Thanks, Emily. And so I will go into what is, well, it's no elephant anymore. It's been around a long time, and this year COVID continues to present challenges. And it was no mistake, Damien and Emily, that we invited you to participate, because the program for you has been disturbed by COVID, and that's going to continue into the future, into the foreseeable future. So we can only assume that a number of participants are balking around some of, you know, their ability to apply with COVID, and what some of those changes have meant for the program. Damien, firstly for you, can you talk a little bit to the concern that some people may be having about the unknown of COVID and what that means specifically around travel?
Yeah, sure. Look, I mean, it was obviously a big issue for our cohort. We got pushed back a number of months because COVID really exploded on the scene as we were just kind of starting. I've got to say though, and a wrap to, you know, and I'm happy to take my payment after this, Philippa, but, you know, ARLF really did handle all of that very well in terms of being accommodating and still giving us a really high level of experience on the program whilst managing, you know, during a time when the country was in and out of, you know, lockdowns and the like. So to be fair, some of our cohort didn't get the full experience that we did, and specifically Victorians, and I'm sure Victorians on the link will know what that was all about. You know, it was really very tough for them. But yeah, I can't speak highly enough of how the foundation handles that and takes into the concerns of individuals, and that's probably the other thing. As long as you're open and upfront, confidentiality, they're all very professional. So explain your situation, but yeah, I think it was really well handled, and we didn't get to go overseas, and you know, there's a little bit of a, you know, that's a bit rough, but you know, we still got an amazing experience and learned so much. So I think hopefully by the time the number 30 goes through, you'll be having a mad time overseas and learning all those things from other communities. So yeah, I'll give you my bank details just a bit later there, Philippa, as well.
No, I'll just buy you a lemonade next time I see you, Damien. So thank you for that. And Damien and I actually met in Toowoomba in a hub mode. So I think, you know, what could have started in a very traditional form for the Australian Rural Leadership Program, we met in hubs around the country, and you know, certainly was and continues to be an experience, even as the facilitator in that hub, a time that I can reflect on, and I learned something, and certainly all our facilitators continue to learn from the cohorts in which they engage with. And so for Emily, for you, you'd be one of the few cohorts that never did start in the Kimberley, but I know the experience for you has been just as rich. So do you want to just talk a little bit about what COVID's meant for you and participating?
Yeah, sure, Philippa. So yeah, so the first session obviously starts in the Kimberleys on an outdoor expeditional learning. Unfortunately, we were supposed to go in July of last year, and that was when the country was in complete lockdown. So we were unable to do that, and actually had our first session as a Zoom online session for a period of about 7 days, where everyone was locked in their homes and we were connecting, which was a really novel experience to get to know your other 29 people in my course, people over Zoom. And then we went to regional hubs. So I went to Canberra as part of my regional hub. And then just after Easter of this year, we've done a connection and mobilisation session in Victoria. But we're lucky enough to be actually off to the Kimberleys in 4 weeks for another 2 weeks, which will conclude, and we will get to go overseas to New Zealand at the end of the year. So our program has been stretched out, and you know, we had a lot of discussion in our cohort about what COVID meant and were we getting the value out of the program. And I think that the underlying conclusion that we came to is COVID's the new norm. So in our professional lives, we have to be able to adapt. We have to be resilient in those situations. And what we thought may have happened is not going to happen. So we've actually got to be okay with that. Have we got less out of the program? Absolutely not. But we've adapted it and made the best out of the situation. It's amazing what you can get to know about your network in a Zoom situation for 7 days with their kids in the back being homeschooled.
Yes, people have heard me at my best and my worst, I would say, as I communicate with my family and probably needed a dose of my own program. So thank you, Emily and Damien. I am going to put you on the spot a little bit, and it's a question that's come up in the chat, and I think a really valid one, noting that both of you do represent the ag sector. And so, Emily, I'll go to you first. Can you please name 3 other sectors or industries other than agriculture that are represented within your cohort?
Yep, absolutely. So we have education. We have a lecturer in education out at Charles Sturt University. We have a broadcaster for that sits as a journalist on ABC out of Canberra, and we have someone that sits in First Nations development out of and Torres Strait Island integration out of Townsville in our cohort.
Awesome. Thank you, Emily and Damien. I've given you the harder task because you've now got to choose 3 other industries or sectors that Emily hasn't listed already, please.
Yeah, well, look, I mean, there's only a set amount I can sort of choose from within the cohort, but to be fair, we did have a very strong education focus. There were public servants there that weren't teachers, but they were involved in the public service within the state government in education. We had who's become a really good mate of mine, and I'm going up to Thursday Island to see him in a little under a month's time. But Bernie Keenan, who worked for the Land and Sea Council up in the Torres Strait, and then look, there were people that are in the ag space, but were lawyers, to be honest. Like we had a Lisa Anderson that had a law background, but obviously was on the farm in the fishing industry, but not out on the boats, but doing all, like actually running this, Lakina Lucan, if you haven't looked her up, you should definitely. She's amazing with what she's doing down there in South Australia. As I say, not out on the boats, but actually running a really enormous company. So, yeah, I'm sure that there's plenty of farmer types on there. That's true. But as I say, public servants, teachers, all of them. Yeah, a reasonable amount of diversity considering. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Damien. So I'd say there's no limit to that diversity. Creative arts, health, education, infrastructure, telecommunications, if those applicants and participants in the end are demonstrating a commitment to and contributing to the fabric of rural, regional and remote Australia, then you're certainly eligible for the program. And that doesn't have to be defined by your residential address, because we also acknowledge how important it is for those based in capital cities, heading industry bodies and policy to be connected to rural, regional and remote Australia as well. So this is a chance now for Q&A from the floor. I haven't seen too many pop up in the chat, and just wondering if there was anyone in particular that would like to ask a question. If you could raise your hand, please. And don't be shy. I don't believe for a minute that we've been able to give you everything that you need to know.
I'll jump in, Philippa. We did have a question on the chat. Somebody asked, how are the scholarships matched? Do you want to just have a quick update on that? I think I've answered in the chat, but you might be able to provide a bit more context on that one.
Yeah, great. So the first screening happens at the end of the application period using your application form. And so really that part of the process is merit-based. So we have a panel which includes some alumni and some of our partner organisations as well as staff engage in a process and moderation around applicants that will go into a shortlist for interview. And then that interview, then people are interviewed and given a rating, and it's like A, B, C, D to be crude. However, there's obviously some more detail within that, of which those C and Ds are, potential, not yet ready, of which there'd be appropriate feedback. And also there's a category that says, amazing, unsure of what the scholarship would be. And at that point, certainly if you're in that category, we'd be making contact and working our networks around what possible funding streams we haven't exhausted at that point. And so, as I said before, then like the cotton industry, we look to, you know, if there are 6 applicants in a cotton or the dairy industry, they're ranked, and we will take that recommended candidate based on our selection process back to the sponsor body and say, this is our recommendation based on ABC, of which they then go through a process of, you know, endorsing. They're quite independent of the selection panel for the most part. And in saying that, those of you that are interested in a staff scholarship, so I'm referring to the Department of Agriculture or even Cooperative Bulk Handling, they actually run their process first and then give us applicants, of which we will always encourage them to give us multiple applicants at that point, because sometimes they're, you know, in a system, they're looking for different things than what we might be able to see in individuals, and we're certainly looking at the contribution people are making outside their workplace as well. So I'd say it's very complex. We work with our partner organisations, and in addition to that, diversity is really important for us. So we're always looking at balance as best we can from a gender perspective, that the contribution of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander leaders is important to us, as is multicultural backgrounds and those with any range of diversity of thought, sector. All of it's really important to us, and we do our best to do that, but we are constrained by our funding, and certainly open to talking to anyone who understands other funding opportunities that we may not be currently engaged. And we also do have some philanthropic supporters, which enable us to support anybody that's making an amazing contribution to the region as well. So I can see some questions up. I am going to go for Lisbeth, who's put her hand up, and I can see that on the screen. So Lisbeth, over to you.
Hi, thank you, Philippa. My name is Lisbeth Long. I'm coming to you from Dja Dja Wurrung country in central Victoria. I've got a few questions. So first of all, I've been working on my application the last couple of weeks, and I've put a few links in. Is that okay? Is that acceptable?
Yes, it is acceptable.
Great, that's all right.
If it's a Mills and Boon at the other end of the link, I can tell you right now we're not going to.
No, it's more just to substantiate the application. And my other question was, I've done a couple of other leadership programs in my region, and we've always had home groups. Is that something that the ARLP has as well? I'm
not sure entirely what you mean by... sorry, I wasn't expecting my son home. He just walked in the door. I'm unsure exactly what you mean by home groups, but there are certainly groups that you will be asked to work with, like peers, either based, you know, you draw on each other from a geographic perspective, but also there are tasks that you will be need to engage in across the country.
Home groups is so a group of 3 or 4 people, and you kind of check in with each other on a regular basis, and you have a specific small project in the program that you complete together as a home team. Is that similar?
Did you want to talk to that a little bit?
Yeah, thanks, Philippa. Thanks for the question, Elizabeth. And I also noted somebody had asked about the level of detail required about the project in the application. So it's probably good to conflate those couple of questions that you had for Course 30. So in terms of Course 30, we have asked for people to give an indication of a project idea, something that they have been thinking about. They might have commenced some work on it, or it might just be really blue sky visionary ideas around a project, something that could really bring value to any part of rural, regional and remote Australia, close to home, further from home. So we do require some evidence of thinking around that. So, you know, what would your project be about? And also for you to be able to clearly articulate, you know, it's quite okay to say that you have the idea, but you haven't got the network yet. So to kind of let us know specifically around what parts of those projects you would need to start ideating about in the program. We will use that project as a starting point for your learning, and then those projects will be worked on through the duration of the program. So when Damien and Emily talked a little bit about some of the in-between session work, that is working and ideating around the program, the projects that you're working on. And in course 30, we're happy to introduce peer-to-peer coaching as a methodology and a practice and a process that will continue through the life of this program. I think that's what you'll find offers you the opportunity to work alongside others as peers in a coaching situation, Lisbeth.
Thanks, Andrea. And so I do note a question that's come up in a few forms in the chat, and that's in regards to leadership capability. It is important for the Australian Rural Leadership Program that in your application you're actually able to demonstrate leadership contribution wherever that may be. So please don't confuse that with a particular job title or position or role that you may have. What's important to note from our perspective is that you are already contributing beyond your own agenda to support and enable rural, regional, remote communities in some way. That does not need to be through a prescribed title or a paid job at all. And in relation to age, that's the other great thing about leadership. We need leadership at all ages. And so for us, the energy, youthfulness and innovation that come, well, you can have that at any age too, but for us, young people are really important in the program, in saying that the demonstration of their leadership already needs to be really evident right through to, so we've had people in their early 20s participate in the program. I'd have to say it's not many. They're pretty unique in our 30-year history, but we certainly have had them right through to those in their 60s also participating. And for that part, it's as much about the demonstration of leadership as it is about the intent and the demonstration of a future commitment and where they see themselves having impact. So all is important. And then I'd say the middle, the bell curve, because I would say it's a bell curve, is probably around the 40s, early 40s in a bell curve, but we don't use a bell curve. That's just how it happens. And we love anomalies, so don't ever think that we stick to an age bracket or a job title. Andrea, there's a few questions about the project idea. And I guess what I'd say is don't overthink it. And if you do have some specific questions, direct them to the ARLF team. That isn't something that too many alumni will be able to answer because it's a relatively new component and certainly a new question on the application form.
Yeah, thanks, Philippa. That's true. The only thing I'd say about it is, because someone's asked, is it something related to your job? If in leadership, one of the best things you can always be doing is observing the patterns around you. And if you're observing something in your workplace, or you're observing something in your community, or you're observing something in your industry, on your farm, in your medical practice, wherever it is, in your local school, in the teenage cohort, if you're seeing a pattern emerging and you are thinking to yourself, that requires some form of intervention so that something can change, that is the genesis of your project idea. That's what we're asking for. The seed, right? We don't want something that you and we don't want a project idea that your employer has asked you to enact, right? Because that's just a part of your role. It's an observation of something that requires leadership action. And just tell us what that idea is and why you think that's important.
Great, thank you. So we are close to time. And I will just answer in my closing 2 of the other questions that I have seen. And so in regards to applications, for some of you it can take a while and others will think about it overnight, apply, and that might be their time. And so regardless of the age and stage you are at your leadership journey, your leadership journey, I would say that the program offers different things for different people at different times. And so somebody in their 20s or 30s will get a huge amount from the program, just as someone from their 50s and 60s, because it is experiential. It'll draw on everything you have right now that comes into the program and catch you right then. So it really does, and our facilitators really do cater for that diversity of lived experience and what you bring into the program. And in terms of referee, I would say pick the referee that best suits you and can speak to you. The process is not your traditional job application. We want to know about you. And we really look forward to and honour the fact that you're taking an interest in developing yourself further as a leader, and where your leadership contribution can enact a difference in rural, regional and remote Australia. The Australian Rural Leadership Foundation certainly thinks that the voice of our regions is at the heart of so many of the country's greatest opportunities and challenges. Thank you for everything that you already do. We really look forward to receiving your application. Please reach out to, in particular, Monique Brower, my colleague in the RLF office, who can do amazing things, including answering your questions. Applications are closed in mid-August or early August-ish. And so please make contact. Thank you for your interest and enjoy the rest of your day.